Hey everyone, going to be doing another overclocking video on the Steam Deck today, except we're going to be focusing on the TDP overclocking. I'm just going to show very quickly here, once you have the overclock enabled and everything in the BIOS, this is how I was going through and going and updating the Undervolt as well as the overclock to the actual core clocks. So right now I'm just showing that I'm applying the negative 25 millivolt undervolt, and now I'm going down and showing that I have the max override to 4 gigahertz on the CPU and the max override to 2 gigahertz on the GPU. And that is my overclock undervolt. Now going into the Smokeless is what you need on a USB stick. As long as the USB stick is formatted to FAT32 and you put the files on there, detailed here, you load that in and then boot into it, and you'll have these options after you've done the BIOS Steam Deck unlocker from the previous video. Now in here you'll go into SMU common options this time, and then that's where you'll have the TDP control. All you have to do is just change it from auto to manual, and then punch in the number of what you want to put. So if you want 18 watts, put 18000, and then you'll have to change the PPT control from auto to manual as well, and then change both of those to whatever you set for the TDP. Getting into the results of the overclock and the undervolt and all that, the footage playing in the background here is a program called 3D Mark. 3D Mark is a benchmarking tool you can use on PC as well, evidently the Steam Deck. And the footage that's playing is the iGPU test. I believe it's the Nightfire or Night Strike test. I can't remember exactly what it's called. But anyway, so getting into the results here, on the left is our stock 4GB UMA buffer, lightest CryoUtilities, what I would consider stock for an advanced kind of Steam Deck user. In the middle, we have my undervolt as well as overclock. So that's the negative 25 millivolts across all the SoC, CPU, and the GPU. And as well, I have the max override for the CPU at 4 gigahertz and the GPU for 2 gigahertz. And on the far right, it's the exact same as the middle, except we have an 18 watt TDP. So as you can see here, what is showing in the footage is on the very far left, you can see that the GPU wasn't being utilized as much. And you'll see going into this is a CPU specific test now. It's going to stress the CPU pretty decently. So you can see over on the far left that across the board, the GPU is pinned to 200 no matter what. So we're focusing on the CPU here. So it's hovering around the 3000, 3050 mark. But even with my undervolt and overclock, we're getting up to like 3.1 gigahertz now. So we're getting about 40 to 50 more megahertz, maybe 100 in some cases. I didn't do an exact like benchmark and run all those numbers. I'm just showing a kind of comparison difference. And you can see the comparison difference here. And then going all the way over the 18 watt TDP, we can see that we're 300 megahertz over the stock at times, and that's a sizable increase, I would say. And as you'll see in a moment, the numbers will show that as well. Now, I don't really like the numbers in these benchmark tests because they mean absolutely nothing to me, but it is good to compare 1 to 1 to 1, right? Like it's at least you can say like, okay, yeah, we did get a certain kind of boost there. With these numbers, there's almost a 1300 point difference between stock versus the 18 watt TDP overclock. What that means, I don't know, but it's better. So we can tell that yes, we do get better performance, obviously, by overclocking TDP and the core clock speeds and all that. Now, getting into gameplay and what that translates into gameplay, that's a little different. Switching over to Red Dead Redemption 2, using it simply because it has a decent built-in benchmark. I know running 4GB UMA frame buffer is detrimental to performance, and running 1GB is optimal. However, I'm not testing that. I'm just testing a simple performance from what I would consider stock settings for a lot of advanced deck users to be the 4GB UMA frame buffer and latest CryoUtilities. And then in the middle, again, is my overclock settings, this time with a negative 25, 25, 30. And again, 15 watt TDP, 4 gigabyte frame buffer, and latest CryoUtilities. On the far right, we have the same thing, just with an 18 watt TDP. Now, the only things to point out here really is that yes, the clock speeds are going to be higher, obviously, because I've unlocked them. in the middle and the far right, they are unlocked to 4 GHz and 2 GHz for the GPU and CPU respectively. Seeing that the clock speeds are higher, the only other thing to note is that the temperatures are increased a little bit, mainly on the 18 watt TDP overclock, obviously, but as well in some cases a little bit on my undervolt overclock, but honestly it's not too far off from stock at times. Maybe 5 to 10 degrees at most hotter at times, but honestly not even that far off. Obviously with the 18 watt TDP, we're going to be touching 90 at times, 95. This was as far as I could push my deck with the 18 watt TDP overclock, as well as the 4 GHz and 2 GHz overclock. Again, they're not going to reach 4 GHz and 2 GHz at all, but it leaves the breathing room for them to get up to like 38, 1800, around there at times. Now closing off Red Dead Redemption 2's performance with the overclock and the overclock to the TDP, it's not that drastic honestly, and as you'll see in the numbers, it's honestly, you're getting like a 1 FPS average going from stock to the undervolt overclock, and then you're getting another further 1 FPS average going to the 18 watt TDP with the undervolt overclock. Now, is it worth it? I would say if you're into overclocking and tinkering with your stuff, go ahead and apply an undervolt and an overclock if you want, just with the max override. Don't bother forcing your CPU or GPU clocks. Just do a max override of even with 4 GHz and 2 GHz. Again, you'll never reach those, but it just leaves the room. And then just start tinkering with your undervolt. See how far you can push it before you start getting crashes and things like that. If you want, you can leave the 18 watt TDP or as far as your deck can go. However, just know that obviously the temperature and battery life will come into play with that. Maybe potentially using it as a docked mode, but even then, the performance gains just aren't there. But that would be the only time I would personally kick it up to that 18 watt mark. That would be probably plugged in, just because the performance gains aren't that great. Now you may be wondering, is it worth it to do it for ZELDA? No, it's not. I could show you the charts, I could put the time and effort into making them, but honestly, there's nothing to report. In my multiple runs that I tried to get any sort of difference, I could not get a different average or even that far off from the 1% lows and 0.1% lows. Just to read some of them off. Running 3.5 Steam Deck settings, I would, with my default Steam Deck settings, for Tears of the Kingdom, we got an average of 29.9, 1% low of 13, and a 0.1% low of 5.4. Now going over to 18 watt, we got an average of 30.5, 1% low of 12.9, and a 0.1% low of 6.9. Very nice. Now, the 1.1% low was higher, but the 1% low was lower. So, it honestly not worth it in the end for emulating Tears of the Kingdom. It's absolutely not worth it. What I would do is, if you're comfortable with doing a TDP overclock, keep it on, because you have to do it with Smokeless, and if you don't do it without Smokeless, then it won't apply. And anytime you go into your BIOS, then it'll reset as well, so you'll have to go back into Smokeless to reapply the TDP change. Now, the overclocks do work with SteamOS 3.5, I've confirmed that in testing, so there's no issues there if you want to run the overclock with Tears of the Kingdom on SteamOS 3.5. That's still the way to go, is 3.5. Now, to close things completely off, overclocking, it's going to be something that is up to you and your own personal comfort level. I'm comfortable risking my devices for the name of getting a little bit more performance. Call me stupid, call me crazy. There's a lot of people out there like me. It's fun to tinker and get more performance out of your devices, honestly, for me. Doing it safely and methodically, you won't be able to screw it up too bad. At worst, you can brick your deck. If you go straight for the ridiculous overclocks, like there is the thermal protections in place. I've gotten my deck to crash due to heat concerns. from going with a 19 watt and a 20 watt TDP overclock, it'll crash over after about 5 minutes or so. And you'll know that you've pushed it too far because the game will start to slow down. The clocks will get locked down to like 200 to 500 megahertz on the GPU and CPU. And the only way I could get that to stop was to flip off the TDP overclock and flip it back on a couple times, and then it would kind of sort itself back out. But that's when you know you've pushed it too far and you're getting into some heat concerns there. Honestly, 18 watt is probably as far anybody should really reasonably push their Steam Deck. I know there's some people that can get it up to 20, 22, I think I've seen in some cases. But honestly, I wouldn't bother pushing it that much further, simply due to battery life, if anything else. And that'll do it for this video. If you have any questions or any concerns or anything like that, feel free to hit me up in the comments. If you need a little bit more help or more explanation, I know I didn't go terribly far in detail on how to do the TDP change. But again, if you go to the Smokeless link that I've linked below and in the video, follow the instructions there, format a USB stick to FAT32, plug it in, copy the contents onto the USB stick, plug it in, boot into there, and then you'll be able to get that after applying the overclock unlocker. If you need more help doing that, please follow the link at the end of the video. That'll take you to my previous video detailing more into the overclocking process. Again, thanks for watching. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments, and I'll be happy to help out. Thanks for watching, and have a great day.